Hey everybody, welcome to another Food Plotters Journal podcast. I'm Randy Vanderveen from Strategic Habitat. We are finally in the fall food plot planting season. Opening day will be here in another month for a few states, and it kind of reminds me of opening day of a college football season where everyone starts out with a clean slate and the hope of a successful season. But for some, the season goes south right out of the gate while others score big. I always say it's where preparation meets opportunity. And with August almost here, it's time for food plotters in the northern tier states to get their Brassica seeds into the ground. In this episode number 4, my co-host John Comp of Northwoods Whitetails and I talk about how we plant Brassicas to get the best yield possible, and some reasons why Brassicas might not be the right choice of plants in certain situations. We also cover what to do if weeds have overtaken your new stand of switchgrass, and if you can still plant switchgrass yet this time of year, plus a few other topics. So whether you're listening to this at work or on the road, I hope you pick up a few points that'll help you this food plot planting season. Let's go right into the call with John.
Hey John, how you doing?
Good, Randy. What's up?
I bet you got a lot of brassicas flying off the shelf at this time of year, hey?
If I told you how much I've sold in the last 10 days, you'd crap. Probably 600 bags.
Oh, is that right, huh?
Yeah, and as of right now, I'm just coming home from church now, so I can go to work tomorrow morning on bread and lime. We're probably 35 to 40 more bags behind on orders pending that we got to box up tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So we're doing pretty good right now, but it's Nate starts football Monday, and I'll lose 3 hours a day after an 8-hour days at work. And I'm like, okay, this can really slow down soon.
So Brassicas is the number one blend that you're shipping out right now. And then I would imagine Clover's probably number 2. And then you're going to, probably in another few weeks, it's going to be real heavy into the fall forage blend, right?
Yeah, actually, we've got Brassicas going out the door fairly quickly. And surprisingly, because of the shipping costs involved with fall forage, which is our 25-pound mix of rye and oats and peas, wheat, we're still sending a lot out the door. Brassica planting time probably started this weekend, and then the fall forage and the clover is going to be 3-4 weeks from now. So. Yeah, Randy, it's been the last 10 to 12 days has been kind of crazy. So, it's pretty nuts. But we're truly blessed here up here in Menominee, and we're just trying to keep our heads above water because it's going to come to a screeching halt pretty quick. With the onset of deer season.
Yeah, exactly. I'm already seeing social media light up with comments or questions about. Is it too late to plant food plots, or when's the latest I can plant a food plot? So
yeah,
you're going to have those guys behind the 8 ball, and probably mid-September they, haven't even dished or sprayed or anything yet. There's always a few lingers out there. So
we're located just north of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and into Upper Michigan, and typically this is when we do our Brassicas this weekend. We've got I think a late 70s Massey Ferguson tractor, which is, it's a big 4-cylinder diesel tractor. I love the tractor. I like those old tractors. The throwout bearing and the clutch decided to call it a day, and I knew something was wrong, and I decided to stop using it and got it to a mechanic quickly, but it wasn't fast enough, and it took all the fingers out of the clutch. So long story short, we're down a tractor this weekend, so I really can't get anything done about the only thing we're going to do this weekend is spread our lime, and we're going to be a week behind on planting. So I'm not too concerned about it because, even though you get into, the frost and the cold weather into October, you still get 60-degree days and 50-degree days up here, and those brassicas are still growing. So, not as fast as they would be if it was an 80-degree day like we're going to have. Unfortunately, we're running a week behind, but I'm not too concerned about it. We've planted as late as August 15th up here, and still had really nice softball-sized turnips and banana and cucumber-sized radishes. So, but yeah, it's planting time for sure. In these northern parts of the country.
Right. Yeah. So then, if you get into those second-tier states, like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Are you still looking at first week of August in that time frame?
Yeah, that's probably the beginning of the curve for those guys. You know, I just talked to a gentleman in central Illinois, and he wanted to plant this weekend. And I thought, well, you know, I said, you're just a tick early. I said, because we're 600 miles north of you, and we're probably, you know, just getting into the planting time for brassicas. And he wanted to plant the cereal grains. And I'm like, you know, I just don't think it's going to work out. I mean, they're going to be up in this heat and the sun. You know, the thing is that as we go into fall, you know, the days get shorter, the sun gets lower in the sky, and you know, you're kind of fighting time. But we're still got those long days, and the ground temperature's warm, and everything's growing faster now than it will be September and October. So, you know, those cereal greens, they grow really quick, you know, especially if you give them a boost of nitrogen. Boy, they grow, you know, they could be, after 10, 12 days of planting, you could have 6 to 10 inches of growth. So, you know, those things could be 2 feet tall if you planted them now, or anyone plants them now for that matter. And,
right.
You know, it's just, everybody wants to start planting, but, you know, there's only a few things that you really want to get into the ground right now. And that's probably the stuff in the Brassica family, you know, the cereal grains, and even clover right now. I wouldn't plant clover right now just because of the you know, you could get a nice rain and it'll pop out of the ground, and then you get, you know, 3 to 4 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks of no rain. And if you don't have enough cover on the ground in the form of, you know, dead decaying plant matter, stuff like that, if you've got that clean, virgin, black, you know, nicely, freshly tilled dirt where there's no duff on top of the ground, you've got absolutely no protection for those little tiny plants, man. They're going to be, if you get 2 or 3 weeks of no rain, they're done, you know, unless you're planting in a lower area. So you just got to be careful what you're planting, how you're planting, and when you're planting it, and just kind of watch for rain and substantial rain after that, you know. So you just got to be careful with those other plants. Right.
Yep. I got a client that wanted to plant, well, not this coming weekend, but the following. So it would be like August 6 or 7, you know, and mid-Michigan type thing, you know, and he's going to plant your fall forage. I said, boy, you know, let's wait a couple of weeks, you know, at least till the end of August. And he said, well, man, I'm going to be on vacation, and, you know, we'll have an opportunity to do them. And I said, no, man. You know, last week of August, hey, I'm telling you, you don't really want to plant much earlier than that. And so,
no,
and that's for the fall forage, not the brassicas, but the fall forage, which is your grain blend, which is, you know, for guys that don't know for sure what grains are, that would be your cereal rye or winter rye grain,
right?
The winter wheat, oats, and peas. And, you know, because, John, if you plant that too early, it's going to mature too early. It's going to get too stemmy. It's not going to be the young and tender plants that it could be at the beginning of bow season if you plant it at the last week of August.
Right. Well, you know, as an example, Randy, it's been so wet up here. When we follow our brassica planting, the next year we always do oats, forage peas, and some Berseem clover. Okay, and we didn't get to plant that until maybe end of June, you know, basically a month ago. Mid-June, maybe. It's been in the ground 4 or 5 weeks, okay? Those oats are already going to seed, and they're 2 feet tall because they're growing so fast in this warm weather. So that's the last thing you want going into bow season is oats that are putting out seed, you know, and going to seed. Are they going to eat them? You know, in the cold weather, maybe in December, they might eat the seed heads or something like that, but that's really not what you want. I mean, you want that fresh 2 to 3 week. I guess peas could probably go in now, and maybe early season soybeans. And then if you're going to broadcast into those, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks down the road, that's fine. But yeah, the cereal grain part, maybe oats, you know, just a light planting of oats now, but that rye would get 2 feet tall and just not be really attractive when you need it to be, you know.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and then of course, you know, your clover, like you said, you're just trying to avoid the drought, you know, so maybe the further south you go, you get into, you know, Tennessee, you know, Oklahoma, or Alabama, Mississippi area.
Yep.
Yeah, you
those
really
guys are really dry, I would imagine.
Yeah, you really got to back it up even more, you know. So John, I know we probably talked about this, I think maybe on our first podcast, but, you know, now that we're in the thick of it, as far as the Brassica blend goes, you know, I just see way too many clients that have issues and food plot failure when planting brassicas. So, what are some of the things that you have seen as a reason why guys would not want to plant brassicas? Why their situation is not fit for brassicas?
A couple of things: size of the food plot and sandy soil. Okay, a lot of guys have tried, myself included, early on in my food plotting career. A little 1/8 acre, 1/4 acre food plot. We did brassicas, and a couple of things that are pushing back against you. One is a food plot that small, 9 times out of 10, has got trees around it. It's probably a great spot, but you're not getting the sunlight that you need. Okay. And then it's like I talked about before, your days are getting shorter. The sun's getting lower in the sky as we get into September. And, there's a lot of things working against you in those plots when you're trying to grow a great big leafy brassica. They might need 6 or 7 hours of sun to get, will they grow? Oh, absolutely. But, you want something that's going to grow to its full potential. You want something that's going to put on those great big leaves and get the really nice bulbs. And you're kind of fighting an uphill battle when you use those little plots. So that's one thing is plot size. I don't like to see brassicas alone in anything less than maybe, a 1/3 acre, 1/2 acre, but I really like a companion crop with them, like our fall forage that kind of is going to pull the deer off the brassicas. The other thing is sandy soil. And I've seen a lot of guys online say, oh yeah, you can plant my, Billy Bob's Big Buck brassica mix in sand and it's going to grow. And I just shake my head and I'm like, I must be the only food plot seed company that discourages people from planting brassica when I know full well it's not going to grow. It just will not do well. You will get a golf ball size turnip or a ping pong ball size turnip. The leaves are going to be about 6 inches out of the ground. They're going to be as small as your hand, and they're going to be yellow or purple. Because what happens, Randy, is the nutrients wash through that sand so fast, the brassica doesn't get time to absorb it. So I will highly discourage people. There's a lot of customers we have down in that Gaylord Greenling area that got a lot of the sandy plots, and we just don't want to sell them the brassica mix because I know full well it's not going to reach its full potential. And we talked about this, I think, on our first or second food plot podcast. What is our favorite food plot, or what's the best thing to plant? And I like to see something that's going to reach its full potential. If you've got sandy soil, I'd rather see you plant rye and buckwheat, maybe some oats and some red clover rather than brassicas, because I know those are going to do better, be more nutritious than a brassica that's going to taste like cardboard to these deer because it just isn't doing what it needs to do. So those are the two conditions I would highly recommend not planting brassicas.
Yeah, and to your point about the small plot, I think a small plot would fall victim not only to too much shade and too many close trees nearby, but also if you've got a high deer population, obviously they're just going to wipe them out.
Absolutely, like Randy. Yeah,
planting soybeans. Once they mow down the soybean leaves, it's not going to grow any bean. So the whole idea behind growing it in the first place is thrown out the window. So why not?
Right.
Why not just plant something that's very browse resistant, like the grains?
Yeah. My first brassica planting ever was to the feed mill, and they sold me some dwarf Essex grapes and turnips and sugar beets, and it came up nice. It got about 6 to 8 inches tall, 10 inches tall, and then right before about the second night I bow hunted it, I got to my stand. And this was about an 1/8 acre plot, maybe a 1/3 acre. All I saw was stems. And I'm like, okay, now what? So that hits on the point that you're talking about where, you need some tonnage, especially, these small plots. You need something that's going to regenerate, and brassicas just don't regenerate quick enough, especially in those little hidey hole plots that I think, it's just warranted that you need something other than brassicas possibly.
Yeah. So as far as planting brassicas, there's, some different food plot seeds require different types of planting methods, obviously different soil or, fertilizer blends and whatnot. So for guys that, the most common guy, he's going to go out there and he's going to till and work up the soil and whatnot. He's got to put fertilizer down. So What's your best or what's your most recommended method for planting brassicas in a situation like that?
Okay. For planting brassicas, this is how we've been doing it for years with great success. Now, keep in mind, I do occasionally overseed, and everybody's going to do it. What we'll do is, and I like to do this all within 24 hours because when you're tilling, and we still till, we're doing our 3-strip method, we still do a little bit of tilling. We're going to spread our lime and our fertilizer that we need right away. Okay, get that on top of the ground. Then we're going to come in with our tiller. I like to only do one pass, but, it depends on, this is a brand new plot. It's going to depend on what's there right now, but typically we'll do one pass. Okay, so now we got this nice fluffy ground. Fertilizer and lime has been tilled in. Okay, now we come through with a cultipacker and pack the ground flat. And if you don't have a cultipacker, you can use a lawn roller, you can use your ATV tires, you can use your truck tires, but get that food plot packed down flat. Okay, now we're going to use a half acre as an example here. Now we're going to plant a half acre, and our Sweet Feast Brassica bag comes in 3-pound bags, and it is for a half acre. So now what I'll do is I use the red Earthway bag seeder. I don't like those little plastic whirligigs you get at Menards. Those little, they hold about 3 pounds of seed. I don't like those because somehow, some way, these little tiny brassicas somehow get into the gears, and you can go about 25 feet, and it's locked up. That's what I have found. Some guys use them and do great with them, but I don't like them. But in a pinch, I guess you can use them. So what I'll do is I'll take half the brassica, I'll put it in my red Earthway bag seeder. I set the seeder at 1, and I walk north and south, okay, through the whole plot, going back and forth, north and south, until all the seed is gone. Then I'll take the other half, and I'm going to walk east and west in the plot, back and forth, until all the seed is gone, okay? So now if you're going to do, like, let's say you're doing a 3rd acre, then you're not going to want to use that whole 3 pounds of brassica. You're going to want to, and I'll actually go out and measure my food plots and get it. I've got it perfect. I mean, if I need a little bit extra, we'll grab a couple, a little handful of radishes, or we'll have a little bit smaller than a half acre plot. We'll use a little bit less, More is not better with brassicas. You can get away with that with clover. You can get away with that with cereal grains, but brassicas, if the directions, whether it's ours or somebody else's mix, if they say use 2 pounds, use 3 pounds or 4 pounds, you stick to that directions, and you'll have a successful plot. And then once the seed's on the ground, we'll pack it one more time, and then you're done. Hope for a little bit of rain. Sometimes we'll top dress a little bit of urea, or I usually use slow-release lawn fertilizer instead of urea, because we had a problem a couple of years ago where we got a lot of rain in August. We top dressed with urea, and we had, in 2 out of our 4 brassica plots, we had a white mold problem. We actually had an agronomist come out and look at it, and he said you put too much urea down, and the brassica canopied so fast that there was no way the moisture could evaporate, and it had white mold on the ground, and then it killed the brassicas. So what we've done is I think last year we didn't even top dress because we used adequate nitrogen at planting. And the other thing we did last year to help the nitrogen feed the brassicas is we put in 100 pounds per acre of winter peas. And, some people say that doesn't work. Some people say it does work. All I know is we did not need that top dress last year because the brassicas look so good. So you got to be careful on how much nitrogen you put down once the brassicas are growing. But most people, and myself included, I have top dressed. But, you got to be careful on, make sure that they're not canopied yet. Make sure the plant leaves are dry, because if you get, let's say in the morning when you're going to spread urea on them and the urea sticks to the leaf, you could burn the leaves.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely in the morning. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. Make sure the plants are dry.
So, that's one thing I had. I saw a couple food plots, earlier this spring where, they just got stunted. Like you said, they were just little golf balls, ping pong balls. And most of the time it's because they planted the brassicas too heavy. Like you said, they don't tolerate competition amongst each other. But what about, what if you put on the correct amount of brassica seeds per acre, but then you also throw in some grain blends? Let's say you go over it after the brassicas are down. Now you go over and you throw some grains down and whatnot. Now, would you consider that competition that would serve to stunt some of the brassica growth?
That's hard to say, Randy, because, as we've discussed before, I'm a big follower of David Brandt and Gabe Brown, and those guys kind of they like adding that, that there's that symbiotic, I can't even pronounce the word, symbiotic relationship of, these plants are going to feed off of each other. I don't like to add a whole lot to my brassicas, but, I know a friend of ours tried 25 pounds of oats per acre and some crimson clover, and he had a phenomenal brassica stand. And I did the 100 pounds per acre winter peas, and if I notice there's, we've got a few plots here around the house, and the deer seem to get on the brassicas early. The second I see them browsing on them in September, I'm going in and I'm adding winter rye to them, because I know there's going to be nothing left come the end of October. So the winter rye does, so I've never really seen that stunt the brassicas, but would I purposely go put 50 to 100 pounds of rye planted the same day as the brassicas? Absolutely not. I don't want to do that. I want the brassicas and the peas to get off to a great start. I think maybe 25 pounds of oats, because that's not a lot of oats per acre. I don't think that's a bad idea. But I don't know if I'd have, like if we did 100 pounds of fall forage and 6 pounds of brassicas all in 1 acre, boy, I just don't think you get good results from the brassicas. I just don't, but a little bit of cereal grains like oats at the brassica planting may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you were to put peas in it, it would probably help the radish in that blend, right?
I did it last year, and but the other thing we do when we're talking about brassicas, this is when I'll pull my soil test. I'll pull my soil test now. Actually, we did ours a week ago, and we just got it back last night, and I was kind of shocked at the results. We still have an excessively high phosphorus reading, and this year we have a pretty high potassium reading. So our fertilizer requirements are going to be just high on the nitrogen side, and pretty much low on everything else. So anyway, we'll pull our soil test now, do our fertilizing now, and I think if you can get that correct, that's a big thing. Could you imagine if we would go in now with a high phosphorus, an excessive phosphorus, which I see a lot in UP, and we had an excessive potassium reading? Can you imagine if we went there with 200 pounds of triple 19 at planting? By gosh, I don't think these things would do very well. I just don't. You're just dumping more phosphorus on top of phosphorus, and I just don't think it's going to be a good result. I do believe, though, that was one of the reasons we had a successful brassica planting last year with absolutely no yellowing, no purpling at all of the leaves. I just think that there's something to that, adding winter peas to the brassica planting. Because the funny thing is here, they'll eat darn near anything up here. They're not a big fan of peas. I can't believe, I don't get it. They don't really go after the peas like they do everything else. So,
So why do you put winter peas in there instead of something like, what other pea is out there, like cow peas or spring peas or something?
Well, there's cow peas and there's forage peas. Or you could do soybeans, but the thing is, I really don't want to attract them to that brassica right away. I mean, if you had a food plot, they'll be in there nipping at the soybeans. But what I'm doing is I'm looking for the winter peas. They're inoculated, so in theory they're creating nitrogen nodules right away, and they're giving off nitrogen. And there's just the belief out there that these plants need to be killed or terminated before the brassicas can use nitrogen. But then if you talk to David Brandt, and I'm going to actually have a conversation with him soon because I've got some other questions for him, he believes that the growing nitrogen will be used by the growing brassicas, and then the peas growing sense that the brassicas are taking the nitrogen, so they put off even more nodules. I've just looked at the studies he's done and the studies that I believe it's Ohio State have done on his farm that shows this actually happens. I like those legumes growing with the brassicas, that they're not going to outcompete them. I saw probably the best stand of brassica at 6 pounds an acre and 100 pounds per acre of winter peas. It's the best brassica stand I've ever seen. But we've got also, that's where we did our soil test and amended everything according to what we needed. Yeah, because brassicas are so finicky, and so if you're going to do a soil test, that's where I'm going to pull it, is where the brassicas are going to go.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, let me ask you, have you sold more switchgrass this year than you normally have?
Yeah, we've sold a lot of switchgrass this year. Just only cave and rock. We don't deal with, I think it's Dakota. We don't deal with Blackwell because I don't have any experience with it, And so I want to, if we're going to sell something, I want to use it. But yeah, we've sold a lot of cave and rock switchgrass. One of the things we tried last year, and I think it was Jake Yellinger had talked about it. We took a spot about 1/8 of an acre with our plot screen, and we added switchgrass to it. And this spring, I wasn't really encouraged by the results, but holy cow, I'm encouraged now. That stuff's 4 feet tall and really thick. So we actually did that yesterday. We added more switchgrass to another spot of food plot screen, and then we're hoping for the same results.
Nice. Yep. So your sorghum, or was it like a Sudan?
No, it was our actual. Actually, I take that back, Randy. It was a combination of our hybrid sorghum, food plot screen, and some Egyptian wheat. But we planted that at the normal, 8 pounds an acre, and then we added some switchgrass in between, and it must have taken pretty good and caught pretty good because this year, and I know it's a spot that I need for screening in the future, but it took really well. I was shocked, and Jake had talked about this, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try, So we were putting in some late sorghum last year, early July or end of June maybe. And we needed it to get about 8 feet tall because there's a deer stand butted up behind it, and I didn't need it 14 feet tall, and so I didn't want it to get that tall. But so we planted it a little bit later, and it's doing extremely well. I mean, some of that switchgrass is 4 feet tall already. I was shocked. It just all of a sudden we get this warm weather the last month, and it just exploded. So, that's a great way. And I would probably think you can be able to do this all the way up until the middle end of July. Okay.
All right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and that's getting at the tail end. I mean, you don't normally plant switchgrass in August, do you?
I've never normally planted switchgrass except in March. I've always ever frost seeded it, And then I saw Jake talk about that, and I thought, I got a little bit of switchgrass left last year, and I'll try it. And I had about I had a couple of pounds left this year from our spring planting, and I thought, well, we'll give it a shot again and see if it works again, because it worked so well the first time. And that might be another way to establish it. If you need instant cover, and you can go in and clean the ground up, and you can, maybe back off on the Egyptian wheat or the sorghum Sudan or whatever you end up planting it with, you've got instant cover there, and then the switchgrass comes the following year. So you could, in theory, you could create a bedding area soon, and then have the switchgrass follow up the following year. And I've seen it firsthand. I'm really impressed with it. I couldn't believe it did as well as it did in and amongst that sorghum.
Yeah. I got a client in central Michigan that needed to do the same thing. He had to have a switchgrass border, and because of what same thing Jake told you, he told me, and so I said, you know what? Let's plant some sorghum Sudan in here as well. And I mean the sorghum's coming up really quick, but you can see that the switchgrass is actually doing better there than in the portion we didn't max sorghum Sudan. So. Yeah,
I wonder if the shade's got something to do with it, or keeping the sun off of it, maybe, possibly. Yeah, but that method works extremely well. I was surprised at how well it worked.
So a lot of guys are having issues with, and that's why I was asking about the switchgrass. You see a lot of guys talking about. It seems as though the switchgrass is not growing, and all that's coming up is weeds and a bunch of other stuff that's not switchgrass. They're not quite sure what it is, but. Yeah. So if you do if somebody has a stand of switchgrass and it's just been overrun with weeds, what would you advise them to do at this point?
Well, it depends on what the weed is. If it's broadleaf, obviously 2,4-D will kill the broadleaves, and we've done that like here at the house. We've got some stuff we're trying, and the 2,4-D will kill the broadleaf. If it's grass, which if you use simazine at planting or atrazine, depending if you've got a restricted use permit, if it's a grass, then mow it out. That's what we did with our stand last year. We got lucky. The first year we ever tried it, we had 6 feet our first year. I'm like, well, this switchgrass stuff is pretty easy. I don't know why these guys are having a hard time. But then reality set in the second year, it was competing with nutsedge and Johnson grass, and so finally in July and then again in August, I mowed it at a foot, and we mowed, we didn't get anything as far as development of the switchgrass. It was there, but it was only a foot tall. Now this year it's 3 feet tall already. It's still got some grass competition, and I think it's going to overcome it eventually, you know. But again, so if it's grass competition, I would say mow it out 6 to 10 inches, maybe a foot. If it's broadleafs, I'd hit it with 2,4-D first. And then if you're hitting it with 2,4-D, maybe you can find a little bit of pasture fertilizer or some sort of nitrogen fertilizer, you know, and give it a light dose of that. And I might give the switch a little bit of a boost if you're spraying 2,4-D.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And so what you're saying is that the switchgrass will then, it's kind of like clover. You know, it's how you control weeds in clover. You know, you're going to mow the weeds out, and then the clover will just take over and choke them out. So you're saying switchgrass will do the same thing to some of that other stuff.
It's hard to say, Randy. It's hard to say because the density, the amount of weeds, how thick the weeds are. But the one thing is whether you're spraying 2,4-D or you're spraying whatever. What I tell folks, you know, especially if they're spraying clovers or they're spraying 2,4-D and screen, do yourself a favor and go do a small test area first. Okay, just go do a small little spot, you know, and then come back in a week and make sure the screen or the switchgrass or whatever you're spraying isn't hurt. Okay, because I have seen once before where somebody thought they were spraying, I can't remember, maybe they thought they were spraying 2,4-D and they were spraying Roundup, and it killed everything, you know. So if you're doing any kind of spraying on these grasses and screens or even clovers, make sure you do a small test area first, because these screens are so important part of the success of the habitat plan or your own personal plan. These screens and the switchgrass and stuff like that, the last thing you want to do is come back 2 weeks later and find it all laying on the ground because you fried it with the wrong chemical.
Yeah, because that's not going to come back then.
It's crazy, but you just, you know, one of the problems we're having this year with our screens, and I'm wondering if something happened with all the simazine that we've all, you know, we recommend simazine to everybody, and I saw a couple of guys say, look, here's the screen that I sprayed with simazine, and it's you know, a foot tall, but this spot of the screen I didn't spray simazine at all, and it's 3 feet tall. You know, you just don't know. So, you know, it's just, you got to be careful, because if you mess it up, you know, it might take 3 years to recover, you know, if it's switchgrass especially. So, but anyway, yeah, just be careful with what you're spraying, how much you're spraying, you know, follow the instructions. But like I said, if you can, just do a small test area first, just to make sure you got what you think you have.
Yeah. And that goes too against, well, as far as growing switchgrass up along a food plot. You know, when a guy's going to start planting his food plot, so he's got to go in there and he's going to spray 10 days prior, whatever, kill all the weeds. And, you know, that's one thing you really got to be careful, because if you already have, you know, an established switchgrass stand, you get any kind of a wind or a drift, you know, I'm telling you that Roundup, it doesn't take much. It'll fry it so fast.
No, I've seen quite a few screens smoke because of a farmer spraying his beans or his corn. And one of our customers had a screen butted up to it, and there was wind drift, and it fried the whole screen, you know. So, yeah, just be careful with that spraying. And, you know, most of the time you could use a little bit of it here and there, and you need it sometimes, but just be careful with what you're doing. Wind drift especially. Good thought there, Andy.
So, John, last thing I wanted to just quick bring up, and that is, you know, for some of these no-till guys, we got more and more guys doing no-till. I'm telling you, I don't know about you, but I see more guys, you know, they're spraying their weeds, and then they're throwing weeds down, and then they're just rolling on top of it or dragging a pallet over it. And it's like, you know, man, I just want to I want to give them a high five, you know, because for some guys, it takes a lot of courage to not till the soil. You know, because, you know, the mentality, I think for most people, is you got to see bare dirt. Well, yeah, and I had posted some pictures recently, you know, that showed no dirt at all, and shoot, the stuff is like, you know, your soil builder is growing like crazy. But anyway, getting back to what I wanted to talk about, and that was, you know, I think I've heard a couple guys say that, well, I don't have a crimper, so I can't really do no-till because, you know, you got to have a crimper. Well, you know, somewhere along the line they were told that, but what I'm seeing some guys doing, and it really is a great idea, and I've not seen a rig like this, but if you don't have a crimper where, you know, you can mechanically kill, a plant versus spraying it with chemical, you can actually just roll it over and spray it all in one pass. And I've seen guys, they'll roll it down and then they'll spray it. But I have a client that's he's pretty good at fabricating, and I think I heard him say that what he wants to do is he wants to rig up some nozzles behind his cultipacker.
Sure.
And he's going to run nozzles with a hose to his tank, and so he can roll and spray all in one shot. And you're basically terminating your crop, your cover crop, over top of your seed by that method versus having to go out and buy a crimper. And I think that's just a great idea. So I think it's only a matter of time before somebody commercially produces a cultipacker or roller with some nozzles behind it. I think that would be just a great idea.
I'm a fabricator by trade, and trust me, we've been looking at stuff like that. So, a spray rig bolted on, maybe Link and Ron can figure out how to make a spray rig onto his Packer Max unit. The one thing I'm wondering is if you flattened it. Now, we're not talking about a crimper here. We're not even discussing crimpers. We're talking a cultipacker or a roller or something. Okay. If you flatten the crop and it's still alive, and if you're not crimping it, okay, the top part that's going to get let's say we're going to hit it with glyphosate. The part that's on top of the ground, okay, the part that when you flatten it, that's up on top, that's going to get the glyphosate. If the stuff on the bottom of that thatch layer doesn't get glyphosate, do you think it's going to come back? That's the one thing I've always wondered about, because I think that's a great idea.
So I think a lot of it has to do with what type of vegetation are you rolling down and how thick is it and how tall is it, So, maybe if the stuff is 4 or 5 feet tall, well, obviously you're probably going to have to, you're going to have to cut that down somehow at some point and maybe do it at a really high setting or something. Or, you just go ahead and roll it and spray it, but then you're going to just have to drive slow. You're not going to be able to fly over it because, you're just not going to get the penetration down through that heavy bunch of biomass.
That's an interesting project and interesting, we've been thinking about stuff like that. And I'm sure there's guys out there doing it, and I'm sure there's somebody out there with a spray rig on a cultipacker or something like that. But you mentioned it before, Andy, and it is cool to see this. And I think you're going to see, that's one of the great things about America is that we're full of innovators, okay? And I think you're going to see some guys come up with some really cool rigs, some really cool ways to do this. But any way you do it, if you're doing it, you're trying to do it, you're doing yourself a world of good, you're doing your soil a world of good. And if you've got healthy soil, you're going to have a lot healthier deer. You're going to have a lot healthier turkeys, just because that's the way Mother Nature intended this to be. And we're trying to do that out here. We're trying to get away from as much tillage as possible. Sometimes you just can't help it. But I think we're down to 1 pass a year now, 1 light pass. And if we can get away with that, get away from it, that's great. So, if you don't have a crimper and you don't have a no-till drill, so what? Figure out how to make it work. Ask questions. Right. Go online. There's so many sites where guys are talking about doing. I saw Jeff's video where he's crushing buckwheat, and that's awesome. That's really cool. And someone else is going to have a video where they're crushing rye or something else, and they're doing it a different way. But the thing is, if you're doing it, you're getting the end result is you're doing no-till food plots. You're doing the right thing, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And, for the guys that really want to, try and get away from as many inputs as possible, like sprays and herbicides and that type of thing, it is true, that all those salts going into your soil isn't really doing your pH much good, So if you really want to move your pH and live off the biology and organic matter off the soil, the multi-species cover crops and then the lack of inputs is really key to really fast forwarding that process.
Well, you're right, Randy. And you talked about the salts lowering your pH. And I was talking before about our soil test for Brassicas. I hadn't done the soil test on this particular strip in our big food plot this is the first time in 2 years, because we did it 2 years ago when the Brassicas were going in, and we're using the inputs, one light tiller pass. And here's the funny thing. The organic matter percentage has gone up a full point. We went from 2.4 2 years ago. Now it's 3.4. Okay. But the pH is still stuck at 5.6. It's not gone up. And I haven't added a lot of lime. I on this, probably maybe 500-600 pounds on this acre. 2 years ago, last year, maybe 400 pounds because it was fall forage, and this year it was 5.6, and that's from the synthetic inputs, is if I understand correctly how this all works. But that organic matter number went up a full point in 2 years.
Yeah, that's
crazy. That's pretty good. Yeah, and again, that's with one shallow tilling pass. And Dave Brandt and Gabe Brown would probably shake their head at me and saying, you don't need to do that. So, but we're trying to do it in a way that most folks can do that, because most folks they don't have a crimper or a no-till drill or anything like that. We're still doing, the Paul Knox method, but we're just trying to eliminate as many passes as possible. And it's the test doesn't lie. It went from 2.4. Actually, it might have been 2.6 2 years ago, but it was mid-2s, and now we're mid-3s. So that's pretty darn good, I think. I was really surprised to see that. I was really surprised to see, though, that pH didn't raise at all. So I guess what I'm going to be doing tomorrow morning, 2,000 pounds and a little spreader behind my four-wheeler. So we're going to hit it pretty hard tomorrow. I'm going to have a sore back tomorrow night.
So John, you're going to be putting on a pelletized, or are you going to be putting on the powdered organ?
We got pelletized lime from Tractor Supply. Had a really good sale on it, and but it's really fine. I mean, it's like almost grain of sand fine. It's not powder, but it's the next best thing. So it's not the heavy pelletized lime where it's the size of a BB or a piece of buckwheat. It's pretty fine stuff. So we're going to spread that this weekend, tomorrow, and then next weekend we'll have our big red tractor back, and then we'll get everything. We'll get our first probably acre and a half of brassicas put in next week. So
awesome. One
update quick before we shut this thing down. Our no-till garden project. The other night we had our first cucumbers and a couple tomatoes and a pepper. And I'm not a big fan of eating peppers or tomatoes, but I loved the cucumbers. Were outstanding. My wife and little girl said the peppers and tomatoes were delicious. So we didn't get any carrots to take. I think the thatch layer was too thick. I mean, it was 6 inches of rye, and those little tiny brassica carrots, cauliflowers and stuff, I just don't think they could push through that, Matt. We're going to have to figure out something else. But a lot of the sweet corn didn't take because we had some slug problems. But we've got beans and peas coming really well. The potatoes finally poked through. And I would say we've had about a 45% success. We had a lot of failures on the small seeds, but a lot of the bigger seeds are doing great, and the food that we finally got to eat is outstanding. So, and you know how many times I went out there and handpicked weeds?
Zero.
None. Zero.
Awesome.
None. I grabbed a couple of, I had a few thistles here and there, and we got a little bit of a dandelion problem, but you know what? So what? It's a broadleaf. It's building soil biology, and yep, we would have had to weed about 40 hours already this year, and nobody's been out there weeding. Not at all.
Wow. That's the same principle as why people put wood chips in their flower gardens,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In their landscape around the front of their house, around their trees and all that, because they don't want to weed. So put wood chips down, and there you go. So if you got some of those areas where you didn't have as good success because they couldn't push through all that biomass of that rye you had. So maybe next year you could go through there, even if it's with a hand sickle. Right? And you could maybe chop some of that rye down, maybe take off 2/3 of it. And then you could roll it down over top of your smaller seeds that had a difficult time pushing through the full stuff.
Yeah. We're gonna adjust how we plant it next year. I think also what we're gonna do, and this is one of the things that I have to talk to Mr. Brandt about, is, when you plant rye, there's that allopathic effect where it's a natural weed killer. It kills a lot of it kills a lot of weeds naturally. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, they kill a lot of grass. So corn is a grass. Okay. And I'm wondering if that's got, because there was so much, I mean, Randy, there was 200 pounds of rye per acre in this garden, which is, it's ridiculous. Because I actually sat down and weighed out the rye last year, and I did the math this year. I'm like, whoa, that was a bit excessive. So, but anyway, one of the things we're going to do next year is where I know the sweet corn's going to go, we're only going to put vetch there, and we're not going to put any rye, or very little rye.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we're going to try that. And then another thing we're going to try is that I've done it once before when we had a cold spring. I actually started the corn in pots like you would cucumbers and tomatoes and that. You start them in little pots, you know, the little black plastic thingies. We actually did that and then transplanted the corn, and it did extremely well. I think we're going to try some of that next year, and then the traditional planting where it's in the rows.
Okay.
You know, but a lot of the stuff we're going to do, I think next year we're going to do a lot of it, start it ahead of time, and then just transplant the stuff. But anyway, it's pretty cool to see how this is taking shape. You know, again, we're only 45% success on the plantings, but I'll tell you what, not going out there and weeding hardly. I might have an hour into weeding and just messing around out there. The Canadian thistle's tough to kill. And we got a lot of that up here, and so I've been popping a little bit here and there, but otherwise, no one's been out there weeding the garden, and it's doing great. We don't have to set up any sprinklers on it, none of that. There's no maintenance, there's no nothing. So, pretty excited how that's turning out. You know, and we're going to learn from it and make an adjustment. But if we'd done this with a food plot, I would say broadcasting and then crimping down, rolling down, or whatever on top of the seeds absolutely works better than broadcasting into the rolled rye.
Awesome, John. Okay. Well, keep records of what you're doing out there, you know, because, man, I know how it goes. You know, you get a year later and say, no, how did we do this last year? You know, we got to do this differently.
Yeah, we're keeping good notes.
That's awesome. Okay, John, we're going to wrap this thing up, but good to catch up with you again, and hopefully you can catch up with your Brassica orders here tomorrow and the next day. Yeah. Your shelves aren't going to run bare anytime soon, are they?
We've run out twice already, but we're stocked. We're stocked within the next 24 to 48 hours, so we're trying to stay ahead of it. But it's busy times, but we're enjoying it. Okay,
good. All right, John. Well, hey, we'll catch up next week, and we'll see what's going on, and hopefully we'll have some more tips and ideas for some guys to move forward on their food plots this year.
That sounds good, Randy.
All right, John. Hey, have a good one, and we will talk to you next time.
All right, take care, Randy. Have a good night.